We move on to this story. The business community very concerned by the spate of attacks on trucks. I'm now joined by Business Unity South Africa President Bonang Mohale. Bonang, let's start right there. Just how safe are drivers feeling? Please unmute for us there, Bonang. There we go.
My dear brother William, thank you for having me. So for us, especially as an academic and chancellor of the University of the Free State, this is more than a coincidence. It is planned, it is coordinated. Because if you look at it, I mean, the first 6 trucks happened on Sunday morning at Van Rienen's Pass. The second happened on the same day in the evening at Waterval Boven Tunnel. And then on Monday, of course, 2 more trucks were banned on the N2 at Mpangeni, when the first one was N3 and then the N4 respectively. So the provinces are KwaZulu-Natal, obviously, Mpumalanga, and now Limpopo. For us, this is the second anniversary of the 2 weeks in July of 2021. Therefore, I think it's not stretching the truth when one can say, remember, that was about a failed insurrection, rampant looting, that was both planned but also sporadic in the wake of what we are facing these days. But, you know, when you consider that more than half the provincial contribution to the national economy comes from just the 2 provinces of Gauteng, at, I'll round off the figures, at about 35%, representing 1.5 trillion South African rands with 14.3 million people. It's followed by KwaZulu-Natal at almost 16%, representing 692 billion rands with 11.1 million people. By comparison, you know, the Western Cape is at 13.7% of the economy, and it represents about 586 billion with only 6.5 billion people. It's important because Gauteng is the 7th largest economy in Africa, with 4.35 trillion GDP. This is about 286 billion US dollars of a continental GDP of 2.3 trillion. So the tragedy with this is that we haven't learned anything since 2 years ago, when at that time we lost more than 350 lives. We banned 200 malls. We decimated 300 companies and 3,000 small and medium enterprises. We banned 11 warehouses and 8 factories, almost 143 banks, and almost 1,000 ATMs that were robbed. Even the vaccines at that time and 2 pharmaceutical companies were not spared this mayhem. And we had even 1.5 million of ammunition stolen in a container in Prospectum. So I think we need to look at this holistically, especially because we were busy reading the expert report on what really caused the 2 weeks in July. And the findings were absolutely damning. And I was hoping that 2 years on the anniversary, which is July, it seems like we are now in a coordinated fashion going through the same failed insurrection, rampant looting. Especially this time, you look, they are targeting the major tributaries of where our economy is. The N3, it's between KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. The N4 links 2 countries, Eswatini and Mozambique. And then the N2, of course, takes the entire garden route. The one that has been sparred up until now, it's N1 that goes through Limpopo. So a total of 16 trucks with one company just saying we have lost more than 20 million South African rands. I think we need to be much more deliberate, purposeful, and conscious that these self-inflicted harms, own goals, where we cut our own nose to spite our own face, ought to stop. We can't be creating another commission of inquiry or another task team. The SAPS is there with almost 180,000 people. The private security companies, 550,000 people, almost 3 times as much. All of us should be holding our hands and making sure that we enforce the rule of law, because crime has now become an epidemic. William, my brother?
What would you say, Bonang, is the slow response from the law enforcement agencies in getting to these events as they start? Because we've seemingly in the last few days seen that the law enforcement agencies' responses to the scenes of the torch trucks has been very slow. I mean, as Business Unity South Africa, when in your assessment, what would you say is the reason for that?
You know, sometimes words might lie, but it's actions that tell the truth. After the first incident at Van Rieenen Pass, it precipitated the president fresh out of the national committee of the ANC to declare this an economic sabotage. To say it is one thing. Today, we have technology. When it happens in one, you know that they've started again to secure the 3-4 major tributaries. And you don't need a policeman or woman every kilometer of the way. Today, we've got drone technology. We can use drone technology and just make sure that we unleash our police women and men like we did during that planned march of a national shutdown. There, we came out guns blazing. 2 years later, it looks like we are still not taking the economy of this country much more serious. Because, yes, we must preserve lives, number one. Number two, we have to save livelihoods, because this economy is already in a deep hole. What with the challenges that we are facing? I mean, there are very few companies that can survive the persistent load shedding with increasing frequency and increasing severity, and just come out of the pandemic. We have just been grey-listed by FATF. We have been downgraded by the 3 rating agencies. We've just come out of state capture, where we stole 1.5 trillion South African rands, where on average in the 9 wasted years, we have been siphoning off at a rate of 20 billion per annum just to the 2 Zubda families. Imagine how many pit latrine toilets would have eliminated, how many 5-year-olds, Michael Komapi and Lumka Khanka, would be walking amongst us with shrieks of laughter rather than having died a sad, tragic, and regrettable death in pit latrine toilets, when South Africa is actually a middle-income country, not a poor country. We collect on average 1.4 trillion South African rands through the revenue services. This last financial year, we collected 2 trillion. Having paid back the VAT refunds, we still banked 1.687 trillion South African rands.
Right.
You divide that by almost 65 million South Africans, there's no reason why anybody should go to bed hungry. William?
Thank you so much. That was Bonang Mohale, who is the president of Business Unity South Africa. Still to come here on Today on the